Call to order this meeting of the Kalispell City Planning Commission. Today is Tuesday, February 10th, 2026. Can we get a roll call, please?
Rory Young,
Here.
Kate Walker,
Here.
Pip Burke, Cody Hunter,
Here.
Doug Kaufman,
Here.
Joshua Borgart, Chad Graham.
I think you with four of us, that break gets us a quorum. We have in front of us some minutes from our meeting in January. Entertain a motion from the board, from the commission.
I move we approve the minutes of January 13, 2026 as published.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by stating aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Seeing none, minutes are approved. We'll move into hear the public. If anyone has anything to bring before the Planning Commission tonight that is not on tonight's agenda, please step to the microphone, give us your name, and let us know what's on your mind. Any public comment? Last chance, public comment for tonight? Nope. Close the hear the public part of our meeting tonight and move into our public hearing. We have 3 items on our agenda for tonight. The first is file KPP-25-06. Kalispell National Multifamily has submitted an application for preliminary plat approval. Second agenda item is file number KPP-25-07. Starling Development has submitted an application for preliminary plat for Starling phases 5 and 6. And our final agenda item is file number KZTA-26-01. City of Kalispell has proposed zoning ordinance text amendments. With that, let's start with file KPP-25-06.
Good evening, and thank you, Planning Commission. Donnie McBath, Planner 2. The item before the Planning Commission is a request for a major preliminary plat approval for the Bloomstone Apartments. Application KPP 25 plat proposes subdivision of approximately 11.91 acres into 3 multifamily lots to facilitate development of an approved Bloomstone apartment project. The subject property is zoned R4 residential with a planned unit development overlay, and a development is governed by the approved Bloomstone PUD. This request does not introduce new housing types, does not increase density, and does not modify the development standards previously approved as part of the Bloomstone PUD. The preliminary plat implements the approved development framework and does not create new land use entitlements. Review is limited to compliance with the subdivision regulations, applicable zoning provisions, and the approved PUD. The subject property is located entirely within the city of Kalispell and within the West Kalispell Urban Service Area. The site lies within the boundaries of the approved Bloomstone planned unit development and is intended for a multi-family residential development consistent with that approval. The property is surrounded by the previously approved portions of the Bloomstone development and is served by established or approved public infrastructure, including streets, utilities, and emergency access. The proposed preliminary plat does not introduce development into a new or undeveloped area, but instead continues an implementation of an approved development framework. The subject property is zoned R4 residential apartment and is subject to the approved Bloomstone planned unit development. The Bloomstone PUD establishes the overall land use framework, residential density, circulation pattern, and a development standards for the site. The preliminary plat is reviewed solely for compliance with the approved PUD, the Kalispell subdivision regulations, and applicable provisions of the Kalispell zoning ordinance. The request does not modify zoning, density, or permitted uses, and no amendments to the approved PUD are proposed. The Kalispell Growth Policy, Planet 2035, designates the Bloomstone site as high-density residential, which is intended to accommodate multifamily residential development at urban densities within areas served by full municipal services. The Bloomstone planned unit development was previously approved consistent with designation. The current preliminary plat does not increase the approved density, alter land use assumptions, or modify the development framework established by the approved PUD. The proposal continues implementation of the Bloomstone development within the city-established urban city service area and is consistent with the adopted growth policy. Based on the materials submitted with the application, the Bloomstone Apartments site is not located within a FEMA-designated 100-year floodplain and contains no mapped wetlands, surface waters, or riparian corridors within the preliminary plat boundary. The site has been previously disturbed through earlier phases of the Bloomstone development, and no environmentally sensitive features are present within the area proposed for the subdivision. Standard erosion and sediment control measures will be required during the construction and will be reviewed and approved through the city's engineering and building permit processes. No environmental constraints have been identified that would preclude subdivision of the property or development consistent with the approved Bloomstone planned unit development. A geotechnical investigation for the Bloomstone Apartments was previously prepared and has been supplemented by a geotechnical validation memorandum dated December 16th, 2025, which confirms that the original findings and recommendations remain applicable to this preliminary plat. The submitted geotechnical information indicates that the site, soils, and subsurface conditions are suitable for multifamily residential development when construction occurs in accordance with the report recommendations. Final grading, foundation design, and site-specific construction measures will be reviewed and approved through the city's engineering and building permit processes. All development within the plat area will be required to comply with the approved geotechnical recommendations. Municipal services for the Bloomstone Apartments were evaluated and approved through the original planned unit development process. This preliminary plat does not modify service demands or infrastructure assumptions and relies on the same public service capacity previously approved. All infrastructure improvements will continue to be reviewed through the city's engineering and building permit processes. Traffic impacts associated with the Bloomstone Apartments were previously evaluated through approved traffic studies for the overall Bloomstone plan unit development. The preliminary plat does not introduce new external access points and relies on internal public street network previously approved and constructed as part of the PUD. The proposal does not alter traffic volumes, circulation patterns, or migration assumptions established through prior approvals. Any site-specific circulation or access details will be reviewed during final engineering, consistent with the approved plan unit development and applicable city standards. Prior to final plat, all noise mitigation measures required to reduce exterior sound levels to 60 decibels shall be installed, all detailed in the submitted noise study in accordance with section 28.309 of Kalispell subdivision regulations. Parkland dedication requirements for the Bloomstone development were addressed and satisfied at the planned unit development approval stage, where the overall parkland obligation for the project was evaluated and approved. The proposed preliminary plat for the Bloomstone Apartments did not create new residential entitlements or increase the approved unit count, and therefore does not generate additional parkland dedication requirements beyond those already addressed. Open spaced areas and stormwater management tracts within the phase will remain in private ownership and will be maintained by the Bloomstone Homeowners Association in accordance with the approved PUD and recorded governing documents. Any required maintenance responsibilities and associated waivers will be documented and recorded at the time of final plat to ensure long-time private maintenance of these facilities. Based on the analysis and findings contained in the staff report, KPP 25-06, staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt staff report and findings of fact and forward a recommendation of approval for the Bloomstone Apartments major preliminary plat to the City Council, subject to the listed conditions of approval. Thank you. If you have any questions, we would be happy to answer.
Thanks, Donnie. Any questions for staff from the commission? No? No questions for staff. Then let's move to public comment. Anyone has any public comment on this preliminary plat application file KPP-25-06? Please step to the microphone, state your name and address, and give us your thoughts. Any public comment? Okay, Seeing no public comment, I will close the public comment portion of this hearing and look to the board for a motion.
I move that the Kalispell City Planning Commission adopt staff report -KPP-25-06 as findings of fact and recommend to the Kalispell City Council that the Bloomstone Apartments major preliminary plat be approved, subject to the conditions as published.
I'll second.
We have a motion moved and seconded. Any discussion by Planning Commission this evening?
It's pretty straightforward.
Seems pretty straightforward, and yet we still have 28 conditions of approval. There you go. Nope, no other thoughts? Can we get a roll call, please?
Doug Kaufman,
Yes.
Cody Hunter,
Yes.
Kate Walker,
Yes.
Rory Young.
Aye. Motion is approved. This will go to City Council.
City Council on March 2nd.
March 2nd. If anyone has anything to add, feel free to show up and talk to City Council on March 2nd. Let's move into our second agenda item, file KPP-25-07, Starling Development Preliminary Plat Phases 5 and 6. Staff report, please.
Good evening. Thank you again, Planning Commission. Donnie McGrath, Planner 2. The next item before Planning Commission is a request for a major preliminary plat approval for Starling Subdivision Phases 5 and 6. Application KPP 25-07. The subject property is located entirely within the city of Kalispell and is part of a previously approved Starling planned unit development. The overall land use, framework, zoning, density, circulation pattern, and development standards for this Starling subdivision were established through prior approvals and are not being reconsidered as part of this request. The Commission's review this evening is to determine whether the proposed preliminary plat for phases 5 and 6 complies with the approved Starling PUD, the Kalispell subdivision regulations, and the applicable city standards, including infrastructure, access, and subdivision design requirements. The request is the approval of a Starling subdivision, phases 5 and 6, which represent the next phases of the already approved Starling planned unit development. The site is located west of Stillwater Road, between 4 Mile Drive and Old Reserve Drive, entirely within the city of Kalispell and within the city's established urban service area. Access is provided through extensions of Timberwolf Parkway and August Way, consistent with previously approved Starling phases. The preliminary plat proposes subdivision of approximately 12.55 acres into 54 single-family residential lots, together with associated public streets, utilities, sidewalks, and common open space. This proposal represents an incremental continuation of the Starling subdivision framework that has been approved and developed in earlier phases. No zoning changes, conditional uses, or deviations are requested beyond what was previously approved under the Starling PUD. The subject property is located within the city of Kalispell and is part of the previously approved Starling subdivision. The site is surrounded by earlier phases of the Starling development and is located within the established urban residential area with existing public infrastructure and municipal services. Development of phases 5 and 6 represent a continuation of the approved subdivision pattern and does not extend development beyond areas previously reviewed and approved by the city. This slide provides context for how Starling subdivision phases 5 and 6 fit within the approved plan unit development. The map on the right shows the broader Starling subdivision, illustrating how phases 5 and 6 relate to the overall PUD layout, internal street network, and surrounding phases. The map on the left focuses specifically on phases 5 and 6, showing the preliminary plat boundaries, lot configuration, and infrastructure associated with this request. Together, these exhibits confirm that the proposal is a continuation of the approved PUD framework and no new access points, circulation changes, or land use entitlements. The subject property is zoned RA1 residential apartment with an approved planned unit development PUD overlay. Development of the site is governed by the Kalispell subdivision regulations, applicable provisions of the Kalispell zoning ordinance, and approved Starling PUD. The approved PUD establishes the overall land use framework, development standards, circulation pattern, and infrastructure obligations for the subdivision and allows residential development to occur in a coordinated, phased manner. This application does not request any zoning changes, conditional uses, variances, or deviations from the approved PUD standards. The proposed subdivision layout is consistent with the zoning designation and implements the development framework previously approved for the Starling PUD. The growth policy designates the subject property urban residential. The urban residential designation is intended to accommodate moderate to high-density residential development within the city's established urban service area and to be supported by full municipal services, including public water, sewer, streets, sidewalks, and emergency services. At 54 lots on approximately 12.55 acres, the proposal results in a gross residential density of approximately 4.3 dwelling units per acre, which is consistent with the urban residential designation and well below the maximum density anticipated by the growth policy. Based on the proposed density, subdivision layout, and availability of public infrastructure, staff finds the proposal consistent with Planet 2034, particularly policies that support compact urban growth, efficient use of infrastructure, and coordinated neighborhood development. Based on the materials submitted, the subject property is not located within a FEMA-designated 100-year floodplain and contains no mapped wetlands or service waters within a subdivision boundary. No environmentally sensitive areas or riparian corridors are impacted by the proposed preliminary plat. Standard erosion and sediment control measures will be required during construction and will be reviewed and approved through the city's engineering process. Based on this review, no environmental constraints have been identified that would preclude subdivision or development of the site. A geotechnical investigation was previously prepared for the Starling subdivision and supplemented by a geotechnical validation memorandum dated December 16, 2025, confirming that the original recommendations remain appropriate for this phase of development. The analysis indicates that the site's soils and subsurface conditions are suitable for the residential development when the construction is complete in accordance with the geotechnical recommendations. Final grading, foundation design, and any site-specific construction measures will be reviewed and approved through the city's engineering review and building permit process to ensure compliance with the city's standards and geotechnical requirements. Municipal water and sanitary sewer service will be provided by the City of Kalispell. Fire protection, police services, and solid waste collection are also provided by the city and were evaluated as part of the original subdivision and PUD approvals. Public infrastructure for phases 5 and 6 will be designed and constructed in accordance with the city standards and will be reviewed and approved through the city's engineering review process prior to the final plat and building permit issuance. Continuation of public services for this phase is consistent with previously approved service capacity assumptions, and no service capacity constraints have been identified that would preclude development of the proposed subdivision. Traffic impacts associated with the Starling subdivision were evaluated through previously approved traffic studies, including updates that account for continued build-out of the development. Starling phases 5 and 6 rely on internal public street network that has already been approved and is partially constructed. No new external access points are proposed with this phase. The proposed preliminary plat does not alter traffic volumes, circulation patterns, or migration assumptions relied upon in earlier approvals. Any site-specific circulation, access geometry, or operational details will be reviewed and approved through the final engineering review process consistent with the city standards. Parkland dedication requirements for the Starling subdivision were addressed and satisfied at the planned unit development approval level, where parkland common open space and recreational amenities were evaluated as part of the overall development plan. Final verification that parkland requirements are met for Starling phases 5 and 6 will occur prior to the final plat approval consistent with the approved PUD and the Kalispell subdivision regulations. Common open space areas and stormwater management tracts within the subdivision will be privately owned and maintained by the Starling Homeowners Association. Required maintenance district waivers will be recorded on the final plat to ensure long-term maintenance in the event of an HOA default. Based on the findings in the staff report, staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt staff report KPP 25-07 as finding of fact and forward a recommendation of approval for Starling subdivision phases 5 and 6 preliminary plat to the City Council, subject to the listed conditions of approval. Thank you. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Donnie. Any questions from the commission? For staff? I have a couple questions. In the staff report discussion of phases 5 and 6, there was a discussion of if 5 goes ahead, it can't stand on its own, and if 6 goes ahead, are those, it sounded like those will get resolved, but I was just curious why they weren't resolved before we put them into a preliminary plat.
Yeah, as we were looking through the application documents and the phasing plan, you know, the numbering of the phases, 5 was to the north, 6 to the south. But looking at some of the road configurations, it looks like, you know, almost 6 would need to be constructed first. So really the text is really to address any changes that would need to be accommodated in phase 5 were it to be built first specifically for street turnarounds and some utility issues.
Okay, so we're just identifying to them that there's probably some tweaking that needs to be done.
Yeah, just depending on how those phases come in and come together.
Okay. And then Keith, while you're at the mic, condition 33 is a snow management plan. That's a new one to me. Is that?
Right, I think
I'm
one of
sure
the,
it's in the design and construction standards. I'm just curious, is that an onerous thing or is it pretty simple?
I think mainly what we're looking for there was, you know, snow fences or something like that, because there was a little bit of a problem. I think everybody knows that area of town gets a lot of the west to east winds kind of blowing through, and the streets were oriented straight into it. So it was just a way to kind of keep that drifting from happening like we've seen in some of the other subdivisions up north.
Okay. And then condition 35, hopefully somebody actually understands what's in that condition with litigation and mitigation and things being sprinkled liberally in there related to traffic.
Covering it all. No, so kind of the intent of this condition is there was identified in the TIS necessary improvements at Stillwater Road and 4 Mile Drive. Those improvements are anticipated to be done with the Affinity project across the road, and that's already been bonded for. But each project needs to be able to stand on its own. So if for something to happen to the Affinity project and it not come to fruition, then we just need to have a condition in there so that those improvements at Stillwater and 4 Mile Drive get completed to accommodate the traffic from this development.
I knew there was an easy explanation. Thank you. Any other questions for staff? Nope. Let's move into public comment. If anyone has anything to discuss with the board or present to the Planning Commission on file KPP-25-07, please step to the microphone and tell us your name, Eric, and your address.
Eric Mulcahy with Sand Surveying, 2 Village Loop, Kalispell. We proposed this 5 and 6 basically in conformance with the PUD. Chad Pelly's here. He's one of the owners. If you had questions for him, and our engineer Brent Foley. We did realize that the phasing got reversed after it was all submitted. So we understand that condition and we'll be addressing it. And we also understand the condition regarding the signal at 4 Mile and Stillwater Road that, yeah, if something happened with the apartment and they didn't put the stop sign in and we were ready for final, it would be on us. So we're fine with the conditions as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Mulcahy. Any other public comment? Public comment? Seeing no more public comment, I'm going to close the public comment portion of our hearing and look to the board for a motion.
I'll make a motion that the Kalispell City Planning Commission adopt staff report KPP 25-07 as findings of fact and recommend to the Kalispell City Council that the Starling subdivisions phases 5 and 6 preliminary plat be approved subject to the conditions.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion from the planning commission? Seems like a logical extension.
Yeah.
All the issues are already addressed anyway. I don't see anything.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Rory Young,
Aye.
Doug Kaufman,
Yes.
Kate Walker,
Yes.
Cody Hunter.
Yes.
Thank you. That passes from planning commission, and I'm assuming that'll go to city council on March 2nd.
Yes. Sorry.
So to our third agenda item this evening, file KZTA-26-01, City of Kalispell has proposed zoning ordinance text amendments.
Yes. So what you have in front of you tonight is really reflective of a lot of the work that we've done with the Montana Land Use Plan. We kind of knew all along that we would need to update the zoning ordinance to reflect changes in state law, as far as process and some things. We also knew that the housing strategies that we were adopting as part of our land use plan would need to get incorporated. And in the last couple of legislative sessions, there's been a lot of land use bills that kind of required us to update our zoning ordinance. We've been kind of waiting on that to take it through as a full package. So all these changes are things that we kind of need to do as a function of either state law or a function of the land use plan that was going through. And just kind of stepping through real quick, a lot of the changes that we did were just cleaning up, like right here, this is our strikeout version, correcting some of the citations that were going there, updating growth policy to land use plan in terms of the text. There's a couple different spots, and just as a side note, on the right side of the screen, there would be some flags as to whether it was a Senate bill. This one was from Senate Bill 214, or specific code sections as to why we were making that change. But Senate Bill 214 required that in this case of ambiguity or uncertainty, if you're trying to interpret whether a use is permitted or whether a non-conforming use is truly a non-conforming use, basically tie goes to the runner, and you're supposed to rule in favor of the use or the non-conforming use, as the case may be. Because we changed some of the density allowances as well as the minimum lot sizes as a housing strategy, it kind of adjusted this PUD density table in our PUD section. So we just changed those to align with those new densities. In the supplemental regulations, we did add in here a provision. This is from section 76-25-303 of Montana Code that had some exceptions for amateur radio antenna heights. We had a housing strategy tied to accessory dwelling units. And so what this is really doing is taking the language that we had in our existing ordinance. We didn't allow ADUs and R2s and R3s, and there was a few little tweaks that we did along with that. But basically this is aligning with that housing strategy where we're allowing duplexes and ADUs in any zone where residential uses are allowed. We're maintaining the 1,000 square feet, which actually is a little more generous than state law in general. If you're not under MLUPA, says no more than 1,000 square feet or 75% of the square footage of the main building, whichever is less. So we're keeping 1,000 square feet as a little simpler and more straightforward. There's some changed definitions and standards relating to manufactured homes and factory built housing. Neither one of those include mobile homes. Manufactured homes were kind of what you'd expect with that, built off-site in a factory and in compliance with the applicable HUD standards. Factory-built housing is also built off-site, but it's a little bit different in terms of a standard manufactured home. It's one that is kind of constructed to certain standards, would often have certain inspection standards that would normally be required. But again, neither one of these would be a mobile home. One of the tweaks that we did with that is currently, and I guess one of the things to explain with this too is factory-built, manufactured, and site-built homes all have to be treated exactly the same under state law, so you can't have different standards that would apply to them. We previously had a 20-foot minimum width for manufactured homes, so we dropped that in order to be consistent. Because we allow site-built homes to be moved from one location to another, jacked up and taken across and put on a new foundation, that standard would apply to manufactured homes or factory-built homes as well. One of our housing strategies was allowing tiny houses, which is something that our current zoning ordinance doesn't prohibit, but we just included it in here to specifically allow it to make it clear and show that we were meeting that housing strategy, which was one of the options under MALUPA. Kind of mentioned before about non-conforming lots and Ty going to the runner there. There was one bill that came through, was House Bill 492 in the last legislative session, that changed around quite a bit in terms of parking, and this also kind of folds into one of our housing strategies. But one of the changes here is for any existing building, additional parking beyond the existing number of parking spaces would not be required. So previously, if you had a new use that was introduced in that had a higher parking requirement, we would require that additional parking to be provided. Under state law now, that would be something that you couldn't do. You would just be able to require what was already in existence. Nothing in this section prohibits somebody going above the minimum, so you can't require a maximum number of parking spaces. Getting into the specific ratios, we can't require parking for, and I guess when I would mention with House Bill 492, that technically takes effect October of this year, but partly because we're folding that into a housing strategy and adopting it now, we're incorporating these in at this point as opposed to later in the year. But no parking required for child care facilities if they're licensed by the state. The residential parking is where the big changes are made. So for single-family residences, ADUs, duplexes, multifamily units, if it's over 1,200 square feet, you can require up to one parking space per unit. For most part, single-family has historically been 2. If it's less than 1,200 square feet, you can't require any parking. Can't require any parking for deed restricted, and you can't require any parking for assisted living facilities. So we made all those changes through there. Getting into some of these other things, zoning administrator, obviously tweaking around planning commission, it's taking off board of adjustments since we don't have that anymore. Changing the old zoning commission to a planning commission. And this is mostly just getting it in line with MALUPA section 7625-104. It outlines the membership, which I would note doesn't have, I think people are kind of used to an old standard where you'd have one person appointed by the county commissioners, you'd have somebody from city council. Under MALUPA, you don't have those. You just have to have an odd number, not exceeding 7, I believe. And then city council can appoint off of that. So anyway, it's a little bit of change in terms of the composition of the membership. Amendments and changes. This is where you kind of get into some of the real differences that you would see there. In terms of amendments, you would kind of come through essentially as we do currently. There's a little more of a detailed process and criteria in the land use plan, but if you're talking about amendments to the map or amendments to the text, the process there is essentially the same as what we've looked at before. There'd be a public hearing, it would come through planning commission and go to city council. So it's different than subdivisions or conditional use permits, which would be very different from what we've had. The main change here is we've had a number of specific criteria that we're supposed to analyze under the former law. This cross-reference to 7625-304 has different criteria that we look at. For the most part, it boils down to compliance with your land use plan and looking at how it fits in with the different elements of that plan. One of the changes that came out of House Bill 713, previously, if there was a protest signed by more than 25% of the people basically in the area of a proposed zone change, then you would need a 2/3 vote at City Council. That's no longer the case. We took out the section on Board of Adjustment since it doesn't exist anymore. Variance applications would come through staff and then get, if appealed, would go on to Planning Commission, but there isn't a Board of Adjustment function there anymore. Appeals, I guess one thing to recognize is whether you're talking about a subdivision or a variance or really any administrative decision that staff would make, there's an appeal process under MALUPA where they can make that appeal, whether it's the developer or an aggrieved property owner or neighbor that's near them. You can make an appeal to the Planning Commission. You can then appeal from the Planning Commission to City Council, and you can then appeal from City Council to District Court. And again, quite a bit of changes there. Variances, slight change in the criteria under MALUPA with that. The process kind of folds into whatever that end process is going to be with subdivisions and conditional use permits, whether that includes a public comment period or not, or a public hearing or not. A lot of that, as we've talked about in here before, is subject to review by the state Supreme Court, and we don't have that ruling yet. Could also be subject to change from the state legislature. As it currently stands, there would be a public notice and public comment period tied to these, but no public hearing tied to these. Conditional use permits. We've touched on here the process changes. Same process as I just explained with the variance. We would still maintain conditional use permits, although they would not be, again, something that would be coming through a public hearing unless they got there on appeal. And again, citing back to the process and criteria provisions within Montana Land Use Planning Act. And presently, we would keep both full and administrative conditional use permits because there's some slight differences to what would qualify for those, but at least currently, the review process would be the same for both of those. You may recall there was a recent text amendment on revocation of CUPs. That's essentially unchanged through this process. The review criteria for CUP would remain exactly the same. There were some changes in some of the enforcement language, basically spelling out a little bit more about some of the specific remedies that the city might have, and also calling out what we would need to put in a written notice if we're seeking civil penalties from a property owner. There's a handful of definitions that we changed, basically adding in the accessory dwelling unit. We did add in, to make it clear, and this is based on one of our housing strategies, that single-family dwelling would include that single-room occupancy that we had talked about before, which essentially we already allow now. Single-room occupancy is renting a private bedroom with shared kitchen and bathroom facilities. Added in definitions for factory-built housing, land use plan, and manufactured home. Here you can see a number of changes related to housing strategy. We added in, it's just easier off of this appendix table rather than going through each zone, but accessory dwelling units as a permitted use in any zone where we allow single family as a permitted use. We added in duplexes in the 3 zones where we hadn't previously allowed that. Kind of tweaked where we're at with townhouses to align with that. So generally speaking, you'd be permitted to have 2 attached units for townhomes in any of those zones. Most of the zones would have that as a permitted use as well. Multifamily, would be permitted in any zone where we're allowing it. That's also a housing strategy that we would have, where you would allow it as a permitted use in any office or commercial zone. I forgot to put in the P's here, but group homes, this would be a function of state law. We would need to allow those as permitted uses if they're 8 or fewer. And then down in our table for sizes. So if you recall, one of the housing strategies was reduction of lot sizes by 25%. What we did was just going across the board, reduce those by 25%. Some of these zones where we have lot sizes based on the number of units, kind of as a way of looking at density, primarily in the RA1, RA2, and H1. We needed to add it into the R5. We made those adjustments as well so that we would kind of stay in line with what the density and with that 25% reduction. One thing that we did just to align with that is if you're reducing some of these lot sizes, you would also want to reduce the lot width so that we would align with that. So for example, right now we've got 50-foot lot width with 6,000 square feet. If we're dropping down to 4,500 square feet, a 45 by 100-foot lot would seem like it would make sense there. So we didn't make that change in R1, which we have very little R1 in the city anyway, but they're larger lot sizes. But every other zone, we've made that adjustment. And that's the sum of the changes. With that, we would recommend that the Planning Commission adopt staff report KZTA 26-01 as findings of fact and forward a recommendation to the City Council to adopt the recommended changes. I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Questions for questions for staff?
I don't have any questions, but I found, at least on my cursory look earlier this evening, first, it would have been helpful to have this version. We had one that was just full black and I couldn't tell what had changed, so that would have been helpful to have. But neither here nor there, this is much more clear. On the table that has the permitted and conditional PC designation that we just went through, is there a legend that says what those mean anywhere? Because I didn't see it earlier and even I was confused. So I just didn't know.
Yeah, well, I think it's shown on there at the bottom. I could be wrong, but you know, P is permitted, C is conditionally permitted, AC
Yeah.
is administrative conditional use permit.
Okay. I mean, that makes total sense now. I just didn't see a legend that delineated that.
Yeah, we could add in something like that.
Yeah, just so it's clear for everyone. That'd be great. That's all.
Questions? Cody? The only thing I was noodling on, PJ, is City Council is still reviewing the land use plan, right?
They are, yes.
And so I know it's unlikely, unexpected. If they changed something that required this zoning text to change again, then we would have to go through another public hearing.
It would depend upon how substantial that was. You know, if it was a relatively minor change, it wouldn't have to come back through here. But if it was a wholesale change, it certainly would. What our plan is moving forward is, you know, they are looking at the land use plan. They've had 2 work sessions now, and they would be looking at moving that towards a public hearing, hopefully in late March with them. But we wanted to have this teed up and ready to go because we have the May deadline under the statute. So.
Any other questions of staff?
Nope, it appears to be pretty much what we talked about, so.
Okay. Public comment on file KZTA proposed zoning ordinance text amendments.
Hello, everybody. I'm Nathan Dugan. I am the Executive Director of Livable Flathead. Our office is up at 121 Wisconsin Avenue in Whitefish. We are an organization that kind of conducts and provides nonpartisan research and education related primarily to issues of housing policy and transportation policy. And so I don't expect you to make any significant changes to this or really take into account and act on what I'm going to say right now, but I'm anticipating that maybe after May, the city might go through kind of a longer term look at the zoning code after this initial pass, just to get compliant with the Montana Land Use Planning Act. I want to start planting some seeds right now. So my colleague Keegan has kind of been looking into the issue of I guess for lack of a better term, yield after upzoning. So you allow for Kalispell is looking to get 8 to 10,000 housing units, I think, in the next 20 years. So you zone for 10,000 units. How many are going to get built? The research that he has found that's out there suggests that only about 8 to 25% of that upzoning capacity is actually realized over a 20-year period. So for a variety of reasons, some of those lots just won't get built on, or there's currently a single family home on a lot that may have more potential after a certain area of the city is upzoned, and that lot is just not sold. Somebody's living in that house. And so what that means, I guess, is that if we're trying to build 10,000 units of housing, we may need to think about zoning for up to 40,000 units to kind of get to that point over the next 20 years. Realize that's a crazy number. There may be some infrastructure capacity issues there, but point being, zoning for more than just that minimum 10,000 may be necessary to kind of reach that target over the next 20 years. One more thing I want to talk about, I guess, is when we're thinking about like the downtown of Kalispell and some of the other commercial nodes or nodes that are on the future land use map, thinking about the concept of throwing a 1 mile radius around those and making sure that we're able to build as much housing in that 1 mile radius as possible to make sure that in the future we're able to build kind of more effective transportation networks, whether that's public transportation or just providing people with options to walk or bike so they don't have to hop in their car necessarily, or if they are hopping in their car, they don't have to go so far. So within that 1 mile radius, I think a good concept to consider is that first quarter mile. So if you draw a smaller radius inside of that, that's a quarter mile, perhaps allowing up to 40 dwelling units per acre within that, phasing out to 25 or 30 dwelling units per acre over the rest of that 1 mile radius to kind of make sure that we're building concentrating the amount of people around downtown to make business more viable, to make it easier to walk around, bike around, make people not have to drive, 10 miles to go get their things that they need if they choose to live in an area like that. So just want to throw those ideas out, and thank you for all the work that you're putting into this.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing no further public comment, I would look to the board for a motion.
I move the, move the Kalispell City Planning Commission adopts findings in the staff report KZTA-26-01 and recommend to the Kalispell City Council that the proposed amendments be adopted as published.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on file KZTA-2601. Any board discussion? Seems like there's a lot in there that's changing, but we've been talking about it for a long time, so most of it makes sense to me. Can we get a roll call, please?
Kate Walker,
Yes.
Cody Hunter,
Yes.
Rory Young,
Aye.
Doug Kaufman.
Yes.
There's moved and approved and onwards. city council March 2nd? No?
No.
Depends.
This, remember, would be a little bit different because we need to do it after they adopt the plan, but we want to be ready to go with that. And so we're assuming that this would be there, and if we do need to bring it back, we'll bring it back. But
Okay. That's the end of our public hearing. Any old business?
So old business, we've got, we had Mountain View Phase 2, that went through City Council. And we have got the Montana Land Use Planning Act, the land use plan, as I mentioned, that they were just did their second work session on that last night, and are kind of moving through that over the next few weeks.
Any new business?
So new business, next month, we've got a couple applications in. Be amending the West Side Parking District, which is the parking district around Flathead High School. That'd be adding a couple block faces in that area. There's also a annexation of a lot on Highway 2 West, just to the west of the bypass. We would also hopefully be bringing subdivision regs in front of you in the same manner that we are with did tonight with the zoning updates, to kind of bring it into line with the Land Use Planning Act, and again, just try to get that up there so that we can be ready for that May compliance date.
Can we get the red line version this time?
Yeah, we thought we'd sent the red line version. Sorry about that.
I thought it was in there too, and then I was like, "There's just the one with your comments in it." But
Okay.
anything from the commission? I'm gonna get that right one day.
Not for me.
Well, with that, we're adjourned.